I've just completed one of the most extraordinary weeks of my life. I spent 8 days over in Madrid for World Youth Day, the gathering of about 1.5 million young people around Pope Benedict XVI. I met young people, teens and 20-something Catholics from all over the U.S., all over Canada, from Mexico, from the Philippines, from Brazil and Colombia, from the Netherlands, from Nigeria, from all over the planet. And just to bask in their enthusiasm, their joy was a great privilege. It was also a great thing for Word on Fire. And as I make this particular video, it convinced us that these videos really do get around the world and have had an impact on people. And that was very gratifying to me personally and to our whole Word on Fire team. The new technology has given us this extraordinary capacity to reach out to the wider world. So that was a great joy. But many images are kind of burned in my memory. I think of this giant sports arena where we gathered 20,000 young Catholics who were clapping and stomping and whooping it up. I think of Archbishop Timothy Dolan of New York, who, just like David Letterman in terms of the one-liners and striding the stage like a pro, and also preaching the unvarnished gospel to these kids who were wildly receptive to what he was saying. I remember a talk that I gave in this much smaller venue, but it was a hot room. It was just packed with kids, packed to the rafters. And I gave a talk on vocation discernment, and there they were at 10 o'clock on a very hot Spanish night listening. I think especially of this extraordinary army of young people with their distinctive hats, and they had these yellow World Youth Day t-shirts and these overstuffed backpacks, making their way through the streets of Madrid like this giant nonviolent army. I think of, and I have the picture in my mind of this extraordinary gathering, 1.5 million young people at this airfield southwest of Madrid, gathered there for the Mass. They walked out throughout terrible heat. They arrived there, and then this terrible rainstorm hit, and there they stayed to listen to the Pope. I think of the Pope himself. They had an umbrella over him, but it didn't do much good in the rain. There he was, soaking wet, but willing to endure it, to stick it out, with the kids. So these wonderful, beautiful and overwhelming memories of World Youth Day. But I want to focus my reflections now, in a somewhat different direction, on the extraordinary capacity of the mainstream media to miss the point. Typically, when I was in Spain, I would spend the whole day, among all these kids, among the throngs of young people, attending these wonderful events, seeing, for example, all the young, fresh-faced religious and their distinctive habits making their way joyfully around. I mean, all this exuberance and enthusiasm. Then I come back to the hotel room. I watch the news recap. So our TV had mostly Spanish stations, but they had a handful of English stations, CNN and BBC among them. Well, I'd watch the news recap. And World Youth Day was indeed one of the top stories. But the way it was covered was, not to put too fine a point on it, bizarre. So the CNN, commentator would frown into the camera and say, as the Pope arrived in Madrid, he was met by protesters. And then the BBC person, would look very gravely in the camera and say, the Pope, as he arrived for World Youth Day, was met by, angry gay activists or secularists or people angry about the cost of World Youth Day. And you get this sense that the Chicago riots of 1968 were breaking out in Madrid. But by their own admission, no more than a handful, a few thousand protesters against 1.5 million young who had gathered. Also by their own admission, none of these protests ever amounted to much. No event was in any way interrupted. There were a few scuffles here and there. But again, from the tone of the reportage, you'd think that's what this thing was all about. It was about this terrible confrontation between young people and these protesters. I remember I laughed out loud in my hotel room when I was watching, I think it was CNN, and they come in for coverage of this scuffle, this protest going on. Well, I looked carefully at the screen. I would say at least half the people in that scene were news crews. So this was not some major outbreak. It was largely news people covering other news people who were covering these little tiny scuffles. Well, see, here's the thing about it. I understand, that controversy is attractive for sponsors and it makes for good viewing. I get all that. But this gross discrepancy between reality and reportage is not just a function, it seems to me, of the desire for high ratings. It's a function of a dirty little secret, namely that the reality of World Youth Day does not fit the standard secularist narrative, according to which Catholicism is this kind of pathetic, backward-looking, moribund, corrupt institution that is happily fading away in the presence of the advancing sciences and the ever-increasing predominance of a relativist, morality. So there's the good ideology that's emerging, and this old Catholicism is fading away. Whatever supports that view of things, that gets headlines, lots of coverage. World Youth Day did not support that reading of reality. And so, of course, you get this, just call it biased, it would be the understatement of the decade. This deeply distorted coverage of what was actually on the ground. 1.5 million young people gathering. Can you imagine any other group? Seriously, think about it, any other group supporting any other perspective or ideology. Well, it would be major news all over the world. But 1.5 million, mind you, young Catholics come to express their solidarity with the Pope and to celebrate their faith. Ho-hum. We'd rather look at a handful of protesters off on the side. Come on. The thing is, the secularist ideologues want us to believe that the Catholic Church has lost the future. I know we're passing through a very dark time, largely of our own making. I've talked about that, the clerical sex abuse scandal. But have we lost the future? I know they want us to believe that, but anybody who is on the ground at World Youth Day knows that just the opposite is the case.